and identify the troublesome areas. Because obviously it's not all bad. There's some good stuff in here. But identify the idiotic stuff like snow load testing in downtown Ukiah. I mean, some of this stuff is so absurd it's laughable. But identify that stuff and come back to us and say, these are the areas that just simply do not work here. They don't make any sense. They're illogical, and they're not cost effective. Identify those, and then I'd like to know what process is available to protest this. Appeal it, sue, whatever we need to do, or simply say no thank you. What are they going to do? Come arrest us? Hell, take me. I don't care. But this is absurd.
Well, you're going to be seeing this again. It's going to come to you in the form of an ordinance.
Well, then you're not going to get my vote on it. I'll tell you that right now. What happens if we don't approve it? I mean, I mean, that's the stuff that I don't expect you to answer today, Fred,
right.
But I'd like to have that analysis done, because this isn't agendized for any action today, so we can't do anything other than, if the chair is listening and takes a strong hint, he would ask that staff do all this stuff and come back to us at a soon date.
That's why this morning we acknowledged the new jailers, so we can have them on our side.
That's right.
Thank you. A first name basis.
Yeah.
Well, there is no action on this item, but to take your hint one step farther, what would the board feel about an appointment of an ad hoc committee to work with staff, pointing out some of these items that are just on the surface don't make much common sense? Would there be a couple members willing, or a member willing, to point out some of these things to help draft letters such as been produced for AB 2121, et cetera, et cetera?
I think if there's a former fire guy on the board, maybe that would be appropriate. If anybody has that experience.
You've burned enough, haven't you, Joe?
My idea of this, maybe we ought to handle this issue kind of similar to what we're doing with AB 21 and having, we had our water agency director formulate a letter. Maybe if Ray, could you formulate a letter and just maybe hit 3 or 4 of these high points or something?
I could. I guess it's a question of a letter to whom. Is it about the bills that I mentioned?
Well, about
I'm working
the
with Paul Kaler.
implementation of these, whether it's the snow load or the redwood siding or those.
I think more specifically the items we're discussing that are before us today, and
I feel we got to voice our opposition to this. We just can't lay back and let it happen. I mean,
which could then come back to us as part of the ordinance discussion of response to your letter, et cetera. Some of the things that are set in stone and are not going to be available to change, et cetera.
Right. What I'll do is request Chris to identify what Supervisor Delbar referred to as the troublesome areas, and then we'll brainstorm about who, from there, where do we take this thing to become most effective.
Sure. Yeah. I think that's a very intelligent approach, and I want to thank Chris and Ray for bringing this forward. I knew the wildland urban interface standards were going to be strict, but I didn't know about these other things. So I think it's timely that you brought it before us to get our input, because we do represent a very diverse county here, and you never know unless you ask. So
I just point out that at least in this instance, we're in the same boat as most of the other counties in the state of California. All of them are behind the curve on this thing, especially with product certification. And I'd also put out accommodations to Chris. He has gone out there. He has been pounding the pavement, if you will, and meeting with different organizations to let them know about these new code changes. I think he's attended at least 5 different meetings where Chris has been the guest speaker at those. I thank Chris for that.
And I do too. Supervisor Koufax.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to use the word absurd, because I was counting how many times Supervisor Delbar used it. I think it's 7, which is enough for the day, but it's not inaccurate. I think here, since we have a committee, it's the Legislative Program Committee, one of the things we need to do is make it pay some attention with the help of CEOs of it. Pay attention to how these things get through. I mean, because that's come up 4 or 5 times here. How did this happen? If we're watching the wrong bills, or if they have to have a big X on the back that we eat before we notice what's coming down, we have to find out what gets in under the radar. And I think some clarification of that would be very, very useful. And the committee taking care of it would be very useful.
To the CEO. And then I'll come to John.
Thank you. I'm just wondering that some of these activities were not legislative in nature, as I understand them. They were regulatory that happened through the state fire marshal and some other areas. So I think the answer to part of your question, how did they escape us with our all the services that we employ, is because these are individual agencies that are involved in rulemaking that never goes through the state legislature. So I think Chris and his organization of the chief building officials have a lot of pull in these various areas. They, I think, can have a voice with both CSAC and RCRC, who are our partners, to complain about the process, how we went through. But this was not legislation that was sponsored that went through the normal process. This was legislation handled specifically through the state fire marshal's office, as I understand it.
Supervisor Pinches.
First of all, Chris told me about this redwood issue a couple months ago, and I didn't hear anything since then, so I thought, well, that was so ludicrous that they must have just dropped the idea. I didn't realize. But I'm going to put the blame directly on our state legislative advocate. I believe they dropped the ball here. These are, whether it's SB or AB 2121 or this issue, that is our watchdog group in Sacramento. We pay them folks big money over there to watch out for Mendocino County. And not only they didn't watch out for us, they never even indicated there was, and these are huge issues, huge for the economic future of Mendocino County. And if our state legislative advocate don't realize that the redwood industry and our redwood forests are important to Mendocino County, then what issues do they feel are important to Mendocino County? This is a huge faux pas, in my opinion, and I want some heads to roll over it.
Thanks, Supervisor. Supervisor Delbar?
Well, just a quick comment, Mr. Chair. Mr. Warwick, you're the president, I believe, of the Chief Building Officials Association, whatever the title is. It escapes me.
As of this week, I'm the past president of the
Okay.
County Building Officials Association of California.
That's the title I was looking for. I think we have an excellent opportunity with you, current and then soon to be past president of that organization, to voice those concerns. And as Director Hall said, you have been working adamantly to try to address these, and I too want to commend you for that. But I think we have an opportunity here to use you in your position to get our message through too. I think that's a golden opportunity for us right now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Colfax.
Yeah, again, a very brief comment. We have a legislative watch. Maybe we need to expand our watch team to include a regulatory agency watch. And if CSAC is not doing this, maybe that's the place where they should be able to do the regulatory agency review on a monthly basis or whatever is appropriate. But I think here we need more clarification as to, were these regulatory, were there hearings, do we miss these? Did our local people who have some responsibility for these things simply not get informed? So we really need to pinpoint how these very difficult regulations and laws that are impacting us are coming down and hitting us in a way that makes no sense at all whatsoever. And so I think that requires a little bit of a clearing the underbrush before we go charging off one way or the other, cutting off heads and hiring new advocates or whatever else we might find necessary.
Okay, any additional comments from the board? Comments from the public on this issue? Any public comment? Okay, nobody out there. Chris and Ray, I do appreciate you bringing this forward. You can see the